Welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate. Today, I have a phenomenal guest. Let's see. Let's just warm him up a little bit. Today's guest is an award-winning immersive director. He's created XR experiences for artists like Drake and Beyoncé. He's worked with brands like Snap, Meta, and Uber. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Andre Elijah. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, dude. Thanks for having me.
See, the intro's not that bad. Just
No, it was good. It was good. It was good.
perfect. So let's just jump right into it. What got you first into XR, AR, VR? Was there a specific moment you would say that it just like clicked for you, or was it just it was the next brand new toy and you just kind of went for it?
Honestly, it was seeing the Vive headset and seeing VR go sixth off. And it was, seeing those videos of some of Valve's sample content and thinking, one, Valve knows what's up.
Mm-hmm.
They're Valve. So this is probably the next wave. And realizing that I've always kind of had this thing where I can connect technology and real people. And I've always had that ever since I was young. And I was seeing a lot of people, for lack of a better term, nerds getting into this. And, the stuff that they were talking about was really insular for nerds and technophiles. And, I knew at some point you have to bridge the gap to regular people.
Right.
And so my whole thing was, let me understand this. Let me figure out the business end of it, what works creatively, where does that all meet? Cool. Now I got a good understanding. And then how the hell do you meet everyone else out there in the real world to make this last? And the conversations that I was part of, the conversations that I was seeing, it didn't have the normies in mind. And so that was really why I wanted to jump in was how do you make sure this doesn't burn out like VR has so many times before? And admittedly, years past, it was really expensive, right? It was like literally a military thing at first, and then it trickles down. But like, how do you connect it to regular people? And that was always my mission. And so I think like every little incremental step I've taken thus far has gotten me closer to that. And ultimately, my goal is complete the mission. Let the stuff go mainstream once and for all, where we're not getting the articles of, is this stuff gonna burn out? Is it dying? And we're getting that seasonally, it seems. So my goal is to kind of get us to the point where those articles just stop and it's just, it's another medium, it's another platform, etc.
Mm. So when you started, it seems like it was out of curiosity, right? Kind of just
Mhm.
wanting to go that route. So,
Yeah.
but your background isn't in that, immersive technology. It's more of
I don't think anyone
what
has
you're
a background in it, really. Yeah.
right. Yeah, because it's like you started off in film and post production. So I'm
Right.
just curious, it's like how does someone like that make that's a huge jump to me,
Mm.
I think, because it's
No,
more of like
I mean,
doing different things like that.
no, but I mean, my thing has always been cutting edge tech. So when I was really young, okay, so like if we go back to when I was a kid, I was a child actor. I don't talk about it much. It was like commercials and stuff when I lived in Toronto. And I didn't like being in front of the camera. I didn't like the audition process, but I loved being on set. I loved
Mm,
the collaboration.
mhm.
And I was a nerd. So when I speak about nerds, I am a nerd. And I didn't like sports. So, when I got to grade 7, there was a thing in my school called the options program where you could opt out of sports at the end of the day to do something creative. And one of those things was film. And so I joined this like film club program thing at school and they sat me down in my first post-production suite and it was, Mac, Power Mac. Oh my God, not even Mac Pro, Power Mac,
Yeah.
G3 or G4 running Final Cut 3. And, here you had a Firewire capture deck. My first camera was a Canon GL1. And so it was like all pro and semi-pro equipment. You had the external monitors that are all color corrected and stuff. And so here I was, this little kid in grade 7, running a full post-production suite that the pros were using.
Wow.
And so, cutting edge tech. And then you go, all the older students that were about to graduate from high school were teaching us, and they would go off to work, visual effects, and they would go off and like be on sets. And so I started working with those guys. And then, fast forward a few years, and the RED camera is coming online. And that's the first 4K digital cinema camera. Eyes light up like the nerd I am. I'm like, oh my God, and Peter Jackson's doing a short film. Oh my God.
Yep.
And by chance, I was working a corporate job at Canada Pension at the time. I started off as an intern and moved into a systems analyst doing server stuff. And I was a kid. I was like 17, 18, something in there. And one of the guys I worked with was moonlighting as a film director, and he wanted to go to the American Film Institute here in LA. And we were in downtown Toronto. And first day on the job, I meet him, and he's the guy that takes me under his wing. And turns out he's got a RED camera on pre-order. And then he's when the root. This is when the RED is, the price of a house, right? It was like the full setup was like $250,000 or something.
Yeah.
And then one of the other dudes that I was working with, I was supporting a bunch of his productions in China. And guy that he knew had the first RED landing in Canada. So I had like RED number 1 and 2 that were shipping to Canada. By chance, I just fell ass backwards into.
Wow.
Perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, learned those cameras inside and out, became, the quote unquote RED whisperer, supporting productions all over the place, documentaries, commercials, whatever. And then I was doing some editing and stuff. And so the guy, the corporate job, I edited all of his pieces that got him into the American Film Institute as a directing fellow. Learned RED that way. Cool. And then by chance, end up in New York supporting a commercial for a new condo that was going up. And we got the call. And it's, Beyoncé is doing a RED shoot. She's got the cameras here. We don't know how to hook them up. We don't know what to do. Haha. So me and the other guy show up.
Wow.
And, here the 10 cameras all running different firmware versions. They had to be set up for multicam. It was the first 10 RED multicam shoot ever. Plus we had some Canon 5D Mark IIs back when that was the new DSLR thing. And we got them all going. And then we did Beyonce's Live at Roseland concert film, which, went platinum or whatever DVD before Roseland Ballroom got destroyed in New York. And we did that. And we did the live via satellite Michael Jackson tribute stuff. So just cutting edge tech fell ass backwards into and was able to take advantage of. Right. And still the corporate job, that was Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. So, all the dudes that are making money for the public in Canada, doing that stuff, starting as a systems analyst, starting as an intern, moving to a systems analyst and getting to deck out $500,000 servers. And it turns into, disaster recovery. If the building gets bombed, how do you have all the traders up and running 30 minutes later in a secret facility? Cool. Oh my God, I'm in heaven being around all these dudes setting this stuff up. High access trading systems of Bloomberg, right? So I'm just a kid that's able to see all this stuff getting hooked up. And then that's just been the theme. And so, you get to, corporate tech and then into film doing this stuff. And then the next evolution seems to be this whole XR VR thing that everyone's talking about. And again, it's like cutting edge headsets, really expensive computers. There's a trend here.
Yeah.
And then it's always how do you relate it back to people? And on the film side, it was, you're doing all this crazy tech to tell a story in film. And then now it's in the interactive version. And you kind of see the proliferation of game engines being used for a lot of things, right? Again, perfect timing, falling ass backwards into this stuff at every juncture. But when I was getting interested in VR, it was Unreal Engine. I think it was $20 a month that first year for UE4. And then it turned, a year later, it was free. And suddenly, people are using it for architectural visualization, which was my way in. And then, games and festival pieces and all these things into what we have now. So yeah, it's grown. But I think honestly, I've been lucky in that I've been kind of around to see all these things happen. But then also, I guess, ballsy enough to kind of take the plunge and see where it lands me.
Just grab the bull by the horns and go for the
Yeah.
ride.
100%.
So, yeah. So let's break this down. What is the major difference between VR and AR? Because I know there's going to be some people listening probably these guys are talking about something I have no clue. So could you break those two terms down?
VR, you put on a headset and everything that you see is virtual. You're in a completely virtual space dealing with virtual beings, interactions, whatever. None of it exists. AR, you put on a pair of glasses, like I've got the Snap spectacles here, and it is a digital overlay of content, 3D content, whatever, on top of the real world. So you know exactly where you are. You're grounded in the real world. There just happens to be digital objects all around you. Whereas VR, everything is virtual.
Okay. So do you ever think there'll become a tipping point for this mass adoption of AR and VR? Do you think there'll come
Yes.
a point where everyone is just like, it's in hospitals, it's in boardrooms, it's in classrooms? Do you think that will come?
Has Apple ever entered a category and have it not go mainstream?
That's true. That's true. They push it. They push it tough. Yes, they do.
They push it and they get it to trickle down. You know, I got one of the first iPhones, right? And I was living in Toronto. You had to hack it. You had to jailbreak it to get it working, right?
Mhm.
That very first one, it was like 8 gigs, 16 gigs, AT&T only, right? Everyone was clamoring for it.
Yeah.
And now everyone has one,
Mhm.
right? iPad at the time, everyone thought, wait, what is this thing? It's just an oversized iPhone. It doesn't really do anything. Now iPads are the entire tablet industry, right? Um, iPods. We had MP3 players, but then iPod came along and it became the MP3 industry,
Mhm.
right? Apple doesn't play. And even, I'm wearing AirPod Max. I got AirPod Pro 2s. I've had every pair of AirPods ever made, pretty much, right? And now they're a health device. They figure out a way to get it out of just, oh, listen to music. And it's literally an integral part of some people's ability to hear.
Yeah.
Apple
Yeah, yeah.
Watch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Fitness device, medical device. So it might take a few years and it might take a couple of versions, but Apple's never entered a category and it didn't go mainstream.
Mm.
So
Now do you think more people will be hesitant to it, or do you think they'll kinda jump on board once they see the masses going for it?
I don't think it has to do with the masses. I think it has to do with the story. And I think that's the secret sauce for Apple. Like we've had this stuff for damn near a decade, right?
Mhm.
And you had the original Oculus Rift, and it was cool. It was a Kickstarter thing, and it got the hobbyists and the nerds talking. Then we had the Vive, and it was slightly more compelling content. It was 6 degrees of emotion, so you could move around in a space and
Mhm.
kind of see everything from every angle. Cool. It was still very tech centric and enthusiast. And then we have the Quest, and that's a standalone device that it's been lowering the price threshold. But the thing that we haven't had is a compelling story, and we haven't been able to make the case succinctly of what the hell can you use all this stuff for.
Mhm.
And I think there's a reason, and I think the most important data point in all of this is when Apple announced the Vision Pro at WWDC a couple years ago, that video, that 10-minute video that they put out,
Mm.
told you exactly what the device did, how it functioned. There were no surprises from the time that that video came out to when it released,
Mhm.
and it became the most viewed video on Apple's YouTube channel.
It sure did. Yeah, it did.
Compe Compelling storytelling and being able to relate it to people, that's the key thing. So yeah, I think this will go mainstream. But I don't think it'll be, necessarily because of word of mouth. I think it'll be because of intentional, relaying of information and use cases and storytelling.
So, let me throw this curveball at you. How would you tell the story to get people support and get behind it? What would the story look like if it was brought to you and they said, "Hey, we want you to tell this story to the people." How would you
I
see
think
that?
I think you break it up by segment, right? So I'm looking at my AVP here. I got a Quest here too. I have 3 monitors in front of me. I have a Pro Display XDR and 2 studio displays, right?
Mhm.
I think that's 10 grand in screens,
Yeah.
probably, something like that, right? And then I have whatever the latest Samsung OLED 77-inch beside me here.
Mhm.
This $3,500 device is a better viewing experience than any of these screens, right? It's like 15 grand in screens all around me.
Mhm.
This $3,500 device destroys all of them. It is the best movie viewing device ever. I have the Chinese theater 11 minutes away from me, and I prefer to watch a movie in this than go to the Chinese theater IMAX,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So if you need a big space, a big canvas to do your work for productivity, this
Mm,
gives it in spades. You want the best movie viewing experience, this gives it in spades.
mm,
You want to bring over your library of apps that you already use day to day on your phone and your iPad and just have them around you and not worry about juggling different devices.
mm,
They're all just around you. You're good,
mm.
right? I think the
Yeah.
story becomes a more granular and more relatable as years go by. Weight goes down, price goes down, more availability of apps, and people figure out what the hell's going on with these things. But for a certain segment of people, that's a really compelling use case. And clearly, the estimates are they sold like almost 500,000, which is as many as they could ever make because there was a limit on how many screens they could buy in the first place. So, Apple's hit their numbers. There's enough enthusiasts out there that want these features and really enjoy them. And also for sports people, like again, nerd, not a sports guy, but some of my friends that, watch NBA games or F1 or whatever else, it's really cool seeing, having a miniature version of the court in front of you while you've got multi-view, multiple games and multiple screens
Yeah.
going, showing the and then in front of you, you can just see all these guys running around passing the ball, shooting it. So, early days, but I think, for the people that it addresses right now, it does it really damn well.
Okay. So, what excites you about where this technology is headed, let's say in the next 10 years? What excites you about that?
I think it's the fact that there's a lot of capabilities and a lot of things that we've kind of lost over the years. So if you go back a number of years when 1080p was the new thing, right?
Mm.
People bought 1080p flat screen TVs for their Super Bowl parties. That was the impetus that was the tipping point.
Yes.
Then we had this whole thing of like 3D. And 3D was well intentioned. You had people like James Cameron doing it right, right? Where the source material was shot in 3D, was made for 3D. And then you had all the studios that were like, oh, we can charge an extra $10 on our movie tickets and just like do a really horrible post conversion to 3D,
Yeah.
but still sell the street. But because of that, laziness or whatever you want to call it, that whole format went away. And now because of this device, I'm getting 3D films that are appearing better than at the movie theater on my face at home. And it's
Mm.
bringing back this art of filmmaking that I think has a real chance now because you have a delivery um, output that makes sense and can be in every home. And you're not asking people to spend, 10, 15 grand on a 3D TV, right? And multiple glasses and all this. It's
Yeah.
just a headset. And it can display it so well. So, like Dune in 3D,
Yeah.
amazing. All the Marvel movies in 3D, amazing. So I'm really excited the fact that maybe 3D has a chance to come back in a notable way.
Yeah.
Short of that, it's funny. I was working on a document and I was designing it on my screens and I opened it up using the Mac Virtual Display on my AVP, and I actually caught a couple errors that I couldn't catch on my real screens because the screen was so good on AVP in terms of resolution and brightness and everything. And it was literally there was on one document I had a table and one cell was slightly off with the color, just like white to like some light cream thing, but
Yeah.
it was just ever so slightly off, and I didn't catch it on the displays. I caught it on the AVP. And there's also a font mismatch that I just didn't notice on the screen. So, like, attention to detail. If you're like, if you want to blow up a design and see it huge and analyze, you can. It's great. Um, and honestly, like, again, 3 displays, different resolutions and everything. But like when I put this on, I'll just work for hours and it's great. And
Mhm.
it replaces all that for me. So like literally, I'm like, oh, should I just box up these screens and sell them once for all? Because like my setup will be so much cleaner without them. But yeah.
Wow. That's I being a creative, like I'm a designer.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to figure out how not to get car sick. Look at that thing with that thing on, dude.
No, no, it's great. It's great, honestly. And some of the innovate, if you take a look at other devices that have come out over the years, it's like they have this one CPU that drives
Mm.
everything. And so when the system crashes, your pass through will fall apart and then your app will fall apart. And then you get dizzy and like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I can't wear a headset for this today. This thing has like a chip just to handle the pass through. So if it falls apart, the app is still solid
Yeah.
and it'll fade to black on the pass-through so you don't get dizzy and it doesn't do the glitchiness.
Got it.
They've thought
Okay.
this stuff through. So I mean, there's again, it's one of those things, right? It's like when you're on the cutting edge, there's new features that kind of mitigate those risks.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I love it. I use it all the time. And I think that, as we go further along, there's just gonna be more use cases. I'm an extreme example,
Mhm.
right? And it won't be the right match for everyone. But you think a few years down the line, they become lighter,
Yeah.
smaller, plug directly into your computer, then suddenly people can take advantage of some of that stuff. And then also there's gonna be more content that unlocks new features, right? If you ask people on day one of the iPhone, what's the benefit of the iPhone? Was it unlocked for you? Well, nothing. It was like, it was like what Steve Jobs said, right? It was your internet communicator, your MP3 player, and your video player on one device,
Yep.
right? And all they had were web apps. And then it wasn't until like a year or so later we had the App Store, and now Uber is my most used app ever, right?
Yeah.
All these years later, right? We've got Reddit, we've got all these things, social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of, do you have
Right.
a foundational platform that people can freely build on top of? And it's a platform that'll nurture that. And if yes, then things will get unlocked down the road once people, get their bearings and figure it all out. And I think
Mhm.
that's, and Apple knows platforms. So I think there's, I'm not looking at you should always look at tech and say, what can it do now and judge it by that.
Mhm.
But, if you look a few years out, it's like we literally can't predict what's coming. And that's really exciting.
Now, you're gonna have haters. Everybody does. Everybody has haters within something brand new. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions people are that you've heard about VR and AR that you're just like, "You guys, listen, you have to try it before. Don't knock it until you try it." So what
No,
are some of
it's
those?
funny. I don't think there's any that are wrong.
Mm,
I think they're all valid. And, people are like, it's expensive to get into. They're clunky. Battery life doesn't last very long. The cheaper headsets, the screen resolution isn't high enough,
mm,
to do all the things you want to do. AVP is very expensive, right? You probably will have to get a secondary strap to make it comfortable for you. I mean, these are all true and valid. And that's why we're on the cutting edge of this, trying to figure out what works. Um, and so I would say, is there a use case that, justifies it for you? Is there a game that you are dying to play? A lot of people buy a PS5 for a particular title,
right.
right? People will buy a Mac for a particular suite of apps,
Mhm.
right? People stay in PC land because they just like gaming. So I feel like if there's enough features, enough things for you, it'll draw you. And if not, hold back, see where it goes, and then, jump to it, you'll catch up. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I was looking at it in the Apple store out here in Pasadena, and I was just looking at it, and I was like, "I would like to put it on, but I don't want pink eye, so I'm just gonna just stand."
They clean them. They clean them.
I know they do, but it's just how you get that kinda like everybody wants to experience it, but I was looking at it, and I was thinking, how can someone, let's say, older, 60s, 70s. What would be a way for you that you think could be introduced to them on a smaller scale? Because it's like I literally get my iPhone and I give it to my mom, and I have to teach her how to use it, even though it's 3 or 4 years older. So it's like, where do you see the older generation fitting in with this, or do you see them not even touching?
No, I think entertainment is a big one.
Mhm.
When you get older, you don't want to deal with the masses and go to a theater to see a movie, right? And you don't necessarily want to, watch a movie in a shared space when there's a lot of chaos and,
Yeah.
light coming in and everything else. I mean, it's the best for that. But I know people are working on accessibility apps, and you being able to like identify the objects around you. Think of it as like the hearing aid feature for the AirPods, but for your eyes, right? So I think there's stuff coming. Um, Again, it's like, does it have a feature that you want? Jump all over it, and if not, cool. Like, we'll get you later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. All right, so let's go into this word that everybody is using,
Oh no,
the
I'm scared.
the metaverse.
Oh god. Sorry.
So,
Was that a visceral reaction?
listen, I told you, just let it flow, let it happen. So there's a lot of debate around this word, but like, is it still a viable concept? Like, or is it just become a buzzword because it's gone from people saying, "Oh, you can buy land in the meta world, buy property and all this. You don't have to leave your house and all this weird stuff." So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of debate about it. Is it still viable? Do you think that? Or do you think it's just a words that
So
everybody's using to trigger people?
I think it's an overused word, and I think thankfully it's kind of died down to a degree. It still pops up in horrible contexts all the time. When I think of the word, I think of a quote from Gabe Newell, CEO and owner of Valve, and he had done an interview. I want to say it was like with PC Gamer or something years ago. And he was talking about, someone asked him about the metaverse, and he was like, "There's nothing about the metaverse that's different than me playing Final Fantasy 14." It's a multi-user
Yeah.
connected game, you know?
Mhm.
I can buy and sell stuff, I can play with people,
Mhm.
I can communicate with people.
Yep.
Isn't that a metaverse? And, I think a lot of people have kinda distilled the concept down to, Fortnite,
Mm.
and Tim Sweeney of Epic has said, they have the most successful metaverse out there, and I think Fortnite succeeds, because, again, you can group up with your friends, you can meet new people, you can has social experiences where you kind of adventure around in the different modes and everything, and you can bring your people from game mode to game mode. You've got objective-based stuff with the gameplay, or you can build in creative.
Yeah.
That sounds like a metaverse to me. And so I think, everyone was framing their efforts as metaverse efforts to kind of drum up investor hype and get those,
Got it. Mm.
free dollars. But no one really thought about what it meant and how it was already here.
Mhm.
And, I played Counter-Strike 20 years ago, met a lot of people playing that game.
Yeah.
Battlefield, right? Where you had 128 people in a server on PC. I don't know that what people are now trying to say as the metaverse really differs
Mm.
from that. It seems like a new label for an old thing. And then you had the crypto people co-opt it, which was just really weird how all of a sudden these crypto and quote unquote Web3 people were gaming and metaverse people, but they had never worked in a game engine, had never worked in a multi-user application on any level whatsoever. So I think the term is fading away. Obviously, Meta's
Mhm.
named, renamed themselves after the metaverse term. We'll see if the name holds. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the principles of everything that it kind of calls in has succeeded on other apps and other platforms that aren't necessarily in VR. Right? It doesn't need to be VR for it to fulfill all that. So yeah,
Okay. So, do you where do you see the role of AI fitting into this metaverse and these future experiences? Or what do you
it's
think about it?
complicated.
Mm.
Um, right now, I don't see it fitting in at all because I don't think AI is there yet in
Mm.
any meaningful way at scale. OpenAI unlocked that horrible Studio Ghibli feature last week with the filter, and all of a sudden Sam Altman is tweeting that their servers are melting down and they got to throttle, requests or whatever until they catch up. I don't know based on, based on a bunch of people trying to access a feature, your servers are falling apart and you have to
Mm.
scale back that feature. I don't know if that feeds into, what people think of as AI in the metaverse, where you've got, you know, new NPCs and characters that you can have real conversations with context and everything else, when you need more and more resources, compute resources, and this one thing that went viral crashed it all.
Yeah.
If you have the society where we're all participating in this future, and we need these AI bots, even at a 1-to-1, and you've got 100 million people and you need 100 million chatbots, and it burns the whole building down because there are enough resources, that doesn't scale beyond that, especially to
Mhm.
create, a lifelike virtual world like a Grand Theft Auto or whatever, where they're, all kind of sentient, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Being able to talk and recall and search for context, it falls apart really fast, and all of our devices, I got a Steam Deck in the other room. That's 15 watts. I'm talking to you now on an iPad. I got on top of a MacBook Pro, 140 watts.
Mm.
And then you have a 5090 graphics card that's pulling 600 at max and needs, frame generation to do anything, let alone if you have AI running on the card. Right? It falls apart
Yeah.
fast. So I think it's a nice vision that everyone's selling. Um, I don't know how you reasonably get there, and I don't know how you get there responsibly without, energy usage, like all the same things that people were complaining about with crypto at its
Yeah.
peak, energy consumption and cooling. Microsoft says, "Oh, we're going to use the ocean to cool our servers," and everyone freaks out. Like, what happens to wildlife in the ocean? Cool. Well, what happens when we need all these servers to drive this?
Yeah.
Again, it falls apart at scale, right? I think
Mm.
it's a nice notion in theory. And again, just because even if the technical capabilities came online,
Mhm.
unless you're doing it in a artful, smart, captivating, compelling way,
Mm.
you're just gonna have a feature that nobody's gonna use, right? Like so many games. We've got a million crypto games that no one knows about or cares about. You've got a million games that kind of just ape a mechanic that fall apart. Unless the stuff is being used by creative people, professionals, and doing it in the right way, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Wow. I'm just curious because I feel like and this is me just, I'm novice to this.
Mhm.
I'm learning AI just as everybody else is.
Yeah.
And hearing how they had to throttle everybody's stuff, I'm just like, why don't you just do what the crypto farms did? Go out to Nebraska, get you a acre of land, set up your
Mhm.
servers and just let
Go
them
crazy.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's just like I can see both ways of how you broke that down. Like it can be it can potentially be a hot mess.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Do you see a competitor coming up to challenge Apple in this field of AR, XR? Do you
I mean,
see
Meta
any
Meta's already there. I think Apple's the challenger. Meta's been doing it. They've got a lot of knowledge and insight from, what are we on? We're on Quest 3, right? So Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest Pro, and then the two Rift models, right? That's a lot of insight and learning and users over the years,
Mhm.
right? So really Apple's the challenge, which is the position Apple's always in, right? They weren't the first MP3 players. There was, a lot of those, and Sony was running stuff with mini disc and everything. Then Apple
Yeah.
comes in. Phones, we all remember there being like Palm, right? And all those
Sidekick,
companies,
yeah.
Sidekick, all those, Apple comes in. Tablets, there was a lot of Android tablets and random devices.
Yeah.
Apple comes in. So, and then headphones, how many headphone brands existed before AirPods came in and simplified the experience? And then the entire watch industry
Mm.
was upended by Apple.
Yeah, it really was.
Right, so Apple is always the challenger. They're late to come in, right? But they have a refined experience that and again, the storytelling works, and they're able to educate people and inspire them really easily, and then they come in. So yeah, I think Meta is the one that's kind of outlasted everyone else. Google's come and left the space a couple times, and they're about to come back in again. We'll see if it lasts beyond 18 months. You've got a couple Chinese brands. Valve is getting ready to come back with Deckard later this year, so we'll see how they do on that. But I mean, Meta's the big guy on the block right now when it comes to this stuff.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I am in the process of learning it because I feel like I can't be ignorant to what is shifting
Nice.
because I'm just I'm in education. I'm a creator, I'm a creative. I illustrate, so I'm just like, okay, what is this? I have to buckle down and figure out what it is and kind of slowly adapt to what the things you've been sharing and the things you've been saying. So let's jump into the creative process. I know you said for designing an immersive experience, you have said it time and time again in our conversation, the story is first. So, what comes after the story?
Figuring out how to execute and make sure that it lands. I think because the stuff is so cutting edge, and with all these devices now, it's like we've got hand tracking, we've got controllers, we got eye tracking, and yeah, people are integrating AI too, like voice recognition, stuff like that. You know, People get lost in the weeds really easily, and the question is, how do you land and how do you, cut features or what have you to simplify the experience and get people in? And, the biggest thing is you need retention. You need this to become a habit for folks and not, oh, I tried it. That's cool. I guess I'll try it again in
Yeah.
3 years, right? You need to figure out how to make it easy for people, just like pulling out your phone and seeing the notifications, putting it back, whatever else. um, so figuring out how to land that story and kind of get from point A to B,
Mm.
that's the work.
Okay, so it's storytelling, how to land the story, and then would you say it's technology
I
or
think
it's
that
tech?
the tech is always in service of the story and what you're trying to achieve. I don't I You can't lead with technology, and we've seen it, you know, time and time again. It's like, hey, here's this newfangled device with all these bells and whistles, and no one knows how the hell to use them. It's just like, oh, cool, distracting features. But isn't it great that it does XYZ? Well, no, because I'm not actually going to go use it.
Right.
And that's just the tale as old as time. Like I've got, a PlayStation VR 2 here plugged into my PS5 Pro. And it was like, head haptics. There's like a motor on your head that if you got shot, you could have it vibrate, and it had eye tracking and all these things. And what happened to PSVR 2? No one bought them. And now, they're trying to figure out how to sell the remaining lot. Like you can't the bells and whistles and the tech just on its own doesn't do anything. It doesn't move the needle, and it doesn't bring people in. It'll bring in the hardcore nerds, but
Right.
there's this thing in the VR industry, um, where a lot of developers feel like they're selling to the same group again and again. Like every
Yeah.
developer has this feeling they have to own every headset. And
Yeah.
so really every time you make a game, you're selling to that same built-in install base that just upgrades every year to every new device, but it's not capturing anyone new. And I feel like, if you focus on the bells and whistles and like the shiny stuff, that's all you're gonna get.
Yeah.
And really you want mom and pop people walking around the mall. You want to bring in those people because they're everyday people that can spread it further.
Okay. Good, good. Because I was just curious how that lined up for using this technology, because it was just everybody has their own specific steps on how to do something. Like you
Mhm.
start here, you go here, you do this. So I was just very much curious about the process of uh just storytelling and designing an immersive experience. So thank you for sharing that. Now here's the big one. What's the most challenging project you've worked on? And was it either challenging because of the people or the content?
Yeah, the most challenging one, I can't talk about, so we get away from that one.
Yeah.
Um, no, I mean, listen, we did a game of Medieval, VR. It was a port of, I think it was like,
Mhm.
at the time, top 15 rated shooter of all time on Steam. And, the publisher New Blood has a lot of hardcore fans where they know every glitch, every hidden secret in these games, and they know how this stuff is supposed to feel. And they know that if you go to this point in the level and you go backwards for like 6 seconds and go right, you'll stumble upon a secret. Like they're that fanatical. And, appeasing them with our port of the game when they know the source material so well, one of the hardest things ever. And then you compound it by the fact that not only were we targeting Quest, which is like locked hardware, and if it works on one, it'll work on the other, undoubtedly,
Yeah.
we had PC. And the nightmare that is support on not just the PC game, where, you've got infinite combinations of hardware, you've got random pieces of software that will mess up another thing. And then in VR, it's so prevalent for people to have these like really hacky setups whereby, they're streaming, they don't have the device plugged in. It's like it's streaming over a network. And, they're faking that it's one platform communicating to another. And they have some random, Chinese app off like a GitHub or something with no support on that end. And like, oh my God, the game doesn't run, or it's running at like half frame rate or whatever, and we're like, "What are you running?" And it's like, "Oh, don't you know this app?" And it's like, "No, I have a clean system to live and do my job on." Right? So PCVR is hard, man. And I think we all agreed at the end of that, it's like, shit, we never want to do a PCVR title again. Like that was supporting that, like the cost of supporting that post launch was insane.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that, and when you have a game of like a big publisher and like, all eyes are on you, yeah, I mean the pressure's already there. And then when it's just something like that, yeah, I mean it makes it to be one of those difficult things you'll do. Shipping a game is a miracle. Then like,
Yeah.
just add the multipliers for the difficulty, and it gets crazy fast.
Yeah, I believe it. I very much believe that. So with you working with these big brands, Snap, Meta, different artists at different levels of celebrity, what do you think attracts these big names to the immersive experience?
I mean, okay, so I mean the brands and the artists are different than the platforms, so we'll break
Mm.
them out.
Okay.
The platforms are all competing with each other for eyeballs, which ultimately lead to advertising dollars. So when you have content or revenue from actually selling experiences. But, you know, Snap is in an race with Meta, who's in an arms race with Apple, right?
Mhm.
They're all trying to have the platform. And part of it stems from, Apple owns mobile, right?
Mhm.
And secondarily, Google owns mobile, right? They have their own ecosystems with the app stores and the web browsers, and they control the tracking of users and how that revenue flows. And really the impetus for at the time Facebook to get into VR was, if we owned this platform that everyone flocks to, we make the rules and we figure out the distribution of revenue. So if Apple changes rules on ad tracking being the thing that makes us our most money with ad revenue, well, we can have different rules on our platform. As long as we have eyeballs, we can make that up and we can be in control of our own fate,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
And Snap, well, they're an advertising business, right? When you flick between people's stories and you're going through the carousel, those are all ads. Those experiences are mostly, branded or
Mhm.
sponsored or what have you. And again, it's they're in competition for ad dollars and eyeballs.
Yeah.
So that's the tech platform side. In terms of the brands or the artists, they always want to be tied to something new to get them their headlines,
Mhm.
right? And part of it is, they like to go to Cannes Lion,
Mhm.
right? The Cannes Lion Awards come the summer every year, and best marketing activations get the prizes, and they can brag about that. And part of it is they like regular headlines in every website and blog and be like, this artist is doing this new thing. And usually it's in service of, wait for it, getting more eyeballs so you can grow your audience
Yeah.
and sell them stuff, right? Or
Yeah.
have them feel like they're participating in something and not being sold, which they actually are. And then, a lot of the artists that are doing this stuff, they'll announce and have something new that is, wait for it, sponsored by someone that is paying them. So, I mean, commerce drives all of it. I guess the only question is, what's the motivation behind it? But usually it's a cha-ching at the end of it. But having something new that people will flock to and people will get excited about, that's the name of the game. When I got into VR specifically, um, it was on the back of a bootleg Drake project. And Drake's floor plans for his mansion in Toronto had leaked on the BBC. And I was like, wouldn't it be really cool if you could go inside of his house? And I didn't know how to do 3D modeling. I didn't know anything. I knew how to do some development in Unreal, but I didn't know how to model. And it was, dude, it was the jankiest goddamn thing ever. My computer was a piece of shit that couldn't render shadows. So I turned off shadows and I just had some ambient occlusion to kind of fake the shadow. It was horrible. But I ended up calling it Drizzy Manor. I put it up as a website. I had like a fly-through video that took like, I don't know, a week to render on my shitty system, and made a website about it. And like in a month, it was like up to a couple million hits. And over 3 months, it was like 10 plus million. And I was covered in every website, like Polygon. I had pictures like John Carmack, who was CTO of Oculus and the creator of Doom. I had a picture of him next to like the game,
Uh-huh.
and I had all the stuff in there. And Polygon ran an article talking about, hey, you can like see John Carmack next to the game inside of this like virtual Drake house. Teen Vogue ran an article. Dude, it was a Billboard ran an article, right? Like I was getting hit every other day by someone covering it.
Mhm.
And then, brands started hitting me up and tech companies started hitting me up saying, is this like an official thing? Can we get in? And we couldn't do the deal with Drake at the end of it, whatever. But like everyone was calling me, even Samsung back in the day when they were flirting with VR was calling me saying, how do we get in on this? So yeah, it was a thing. So if you have a way to like connect pop culture and tastemakers with, new technologies
Mm.
and use that as a conduit to kind of, start the conversation and get eyeballs, you got a recipe for success.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Just you doing it for fun, not you doing it because someone's paying you. You did it for fun, and it it took off. It launched you. Yeah, that's crazy to to see that and to know that. Um, let's look at some common mistakes these brands have when trying to enter the VR and XR space. Is it because they lack the story first, or is it because they're really just trying to be the first ones to it? What are some common mistakes these brands have?
I think it's buying the expertise and the people they're going to buy the expertise. And so by that I mean they'll go to a flashy agency
Mhm,
where, you know, the budget is going towards dumb meetings and not the work.
mhm,
And they're handing off the most important bits of learning what works and what doesn't, and you don't have that shared institutional knowledge. So you might have, you know, one exec that's like, "Hey, yeah, this is really cool. Let's do this thing." They go hire agency XYZ to build the whole thing. They come back and like, "Hey, we have it." And then that exec goes and he leaves the company. And then someone else will come in.
and
And then they're going to be like, "Oh, this thing sounds cool. I think we did something like that before. Let's go hire these people to do it." And then that guy goes eventually, right? And the way this is going, this is a slow burn. But when it hits, it'll hit. And you need inside of corporations or brands or whatever, you need that shared institutional knowledge that everyone knows what the steps were to get here, everyone understands the learnings, and you know what mistakes to not repeat.
right.
And on top of that, because they don't have that knowledge and they don't even remember who the hell worked on their stuff previously, they're probably always going to the wrong people that are, you know, it's like the whole consultant thing, right? You're burning your money on consultants as opposed to people who are actually, you know how to
Know
do the
what
work.
yep, know what
And
they're doing.
and it crushes you because you think maybe when you take a look at the outcomes, you know, oh, it wasn't as successful as I wanted, but you're still stuck in that cycle repeating those same mistakes. And, you know, there's companies that'll hire, you know, a studio or an agency to do some work for them, and it's horrible. And, you know, they were charged an arm and a leg, and it turns out to be a shit show. And it's like, oh, but if you had just hired this like 20-year-old kid that has all these tools and knows the software, he could have banged that out in a weekend. It would have been way more artful, would have been more impactful because he's done 20 other things like it and has learned the ins and outs, and you would have made it on the, you know, before the due date as opposed to coming in late,
Yeah.
right? And people just don't know. They don't know the language. They don't know the vocabulary to navigate this. And it's like everything else. It's like shiny object syndrome. And you have these, you know, big names that are like, "Hey, we're the guy." And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. And more often than not, the big guy, depending on who they are, will hire people like me sometimes, right?
Mm.
But it'll be like, oh yeah, we had 8 months to do it, and now it's due next week. We don't know how to get it done.
That's
So, you know, and I know of a bunch of agencies and a bunch of places where it's like, you got the big name on it, and they're not the ones doing the work. They're not involved at all, and, you know, it's like, "Oh, you guys just got an investment for, like, tens of millions of dollars, but no one at the company actually did all the work. So what are they investing in? Because I got the
conversation,
files on my
coffee.
computer."
Yeah. Conversations and coffee, that's it.
100%, 100%.
Oh my gosh. Do you think that these big corporations and agencies, do you think they're afraid to, like, push that boundary? Because you push the boundary, obviously. So do you think they're afraid to just have someone full-time on staff like you, where it's just like, "Hey, we know this person knows
It
how to
goes
do."
beyond me.
Oh,
It goes
wow.
beyond needing a me, because I still have a team of badasses
Mm,
that I trust, that I have the shorthand with, that
mhm,
I've gone through the projects with. So I think if it was as simple as, "Hey, we need an Andre," you know, you cut a check and you get one of me. Fine, cool. But I'm not me without all the other team that I've, you know, been in the trenches with doing this shit.
gotcha.
And, you know, the shared again, right? It's the institutional knowledge thing. If I called any of my old collaborators and said, "Yo, I'm getting the band back together. Let's do this thing." We're at it,
Yeah,
and we know how the other person works. We know, you know, how they succeed, how they fail, how to support them, and we get it done, right? And we know exactly who to give enough rope to hang themselves because they're never going to hang themselves, but they'll come up with something really fucking cool,
that's
right? So it goes beyond that one person. You need the team, and then it turns into, you might be thinking like, oh, hey, we want to do this AR VR thing, but if we hired those guys, we might not get a return on it, right? Or it might not get us the return that we need.
Right.
But I don't think most people know how to like pivot the understanding and the thinking of, okay, cool. If we're building a thing for Vision Pro,
Mm.
well, there's only so many users out there, and it's really hard to penetrate, right? And make real money.
You're right.
So then you change the conversation to, okay, how do we do a mobile thing
Mm.
that has a
Yeah.
grown up experience that's like Halo
Right.
experience on the Vision Pro, but the guts of it are here on your phone,
Mm.
and we can get, the masses.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time when you have those conversations, it scares the shit out of them
Mm.
because you go from this, smaller scope that it's like, okay, maybe I can risk it to, oh, wait, anyone can get their hands on this. If the execution isn't perfect, we've just screwed, our brand value or whatever else. But the way this makes sense is you do think of it like that. You put the steps in and
Mhm.
put it in the work to execute properly. And maybe it becomes, an actual stand up business for you too, and not just the advertising thing. It'll drive real revenue and understanding of the market for you if you have everything else in place to be able to collate that and again build up the institutional knowledge. But a lot of
Mm.
time they're not prepared for that.
Yeah. I can see that. Like hearing you explain this, I feel like they're just like, okay, you do it. Like they kind of, how it's like the little kid that you're showing how to draw or showing how to paint, and they just sit there quietly and then they just think and they're like, okay, you can do it. Like here, you do it. Yeah, that can, yeah, that kind of can be annoying, I bet. Um, so let's tap into this one creative space for you. What is a project or an idea that you've been dying to bring to life?
Um, Figuring out music and interactivity properly.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So before the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, somewhere in there, I had done some work with Dead Mouse. He was looking to take his okay, let me back up. So Dead Mouse has an insane stage show, right? The
Right.
stage is called the Cube. And if you look at it, it is a physical cube and then a shit ton of lights behind him.
Yeah.
And the cube itself is on motors, so you can like pivot and rotate and stuff. And then he also has robots, like robot
Yeah.
arms that do whatever they do.
Yeah.
And the cube has a bunch of screens and screens in the background
Mm.
that display video content. And then he has a DJ setup, and it's all based on clips. And each of the individual clips drive different parts of the lighting and the visuals and everything else. And he was trying to figure out, because it takes trucks and trucks and trucks to move the stage show, how do you bring more people into the show that aren't even there? And like, yeah, you could do a video stream, but that's kind of lame and it doesn't really build up, the sense of community and people can't really interact with it in a cool way. So what if we were to do a digital double of the stage show and bring it into a game? That was the thought. And then, you know,
Is that kind of like the Travis Scott in uh
I'll get to that.
oh,
Yeah, Fortnite.
okay, okay,
I'll get to
okay.
that. Yeah. And so he didn't think it could be done.
Mhm.
And then pandemic happens. And all of a sudden he spent millions on the new version of the stage, but all of his tour dates are canceled.
Mm.
And we can't really go down the road. And there's
Right.
politics and people and big music people involved. Um, so we never really get to fully explore this thing. But the tech worked. We figured it out. And we figured out how to capture all the data from a stage and replicate it digitally inside of Unreal Engine. And so if you had with a stage setup, it's like, computer is driving the visuals, which are running in Touch Designer, bringing different video sequences and all this shit live and on the fly, doing the lighting data, and triggering all the lights, and then stage motions. And then on the audio side, you've got, pre-baked audio clips that he's triggering, but then he also has a rack of gear and synths that he's driving live, and that has latency. And so you're sending the MIDI signals to this shit over here, which is actually wired back via audio once you do the data signals over. And then it's all being interpreted in ways, and it's nested layers upon nested layers. And how do you then play the stuff back and then scrub a timeline such that it's not all out of sync and it's like basically latency free and be able to play it at any point you want. Then, in a multi-user setting where you might have shitty internet, I have peak internet, and someone around the world is trying to enjoy this, and we're all in sync. Figure that one out. Well, we did.
Oh my god.
So I've always, forces that be in music is a whole industry.
Tricky.
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
So how do you really build on that such that those capabilities are afforded to any artist, any label, any touring company, and it doesn't take a year plus that Fortnite takes to do a show? How do you spin this shit up in 48 hours? That's what I want to solve.
Man.
And, I'm in LA now. So my family moved to LA a little over 2 years ago. And I wasn't really a concert goer in Toronto, owing to the fact that I was probably like too broke. But also, the concert culture here is dope because everyone lives here. So you'll go to a show and 10 people will pop out on stage
Yeah.
that you weren't expecting just because they all live in LA and they're here. And so ever since that happened, I was like, shit, I really want to be in the space and enable all these artists that have, the one-off shows. How do you bring in people from around the world to participate that in a way that's better than just watching a video? And, I was at the Hollywood Bowl for the first Fear of God fashion show, and Sampha performed there, and it was amazing. And, the video comes out a year and a half later after we were all there, and it was like a 10-minute condensed version, not the 2-hour thing that I experienced and sat through. How do you digitize that so that people can jump in live and really enjoy it? The Weekend, if it weren't for the wildfires, The Weekend had a one-off show planned to kick off the new album. And that was gonna be in Pasadena, I think. And I'm waiting, and it's like, wait, this is a one-off show. Everyone's gonna want to go there. And I remember it was a pain in the ass for me to get my tickets. But if I lived in another country and I was a Weekend fan, it's like, well, shit, I don't want to see him on the tour. I want to see the one-off show,
Yeah.
right? Mike Dean, who's like superstar hip hop producer, I was at his show as well. It was like a one-off. How do you bring people in? And, I worked on Fortnite. They had a thing with Interscope a couple years ago, the Playwave series that like launched during Coachella. And it was like 17 Fortnite islands for like Billie Eilish and MGK and all these folks.
Yeah.
And we were on that project for a goddamn year, pretty much, right? Maybe just shy, like maybe 9 months. And, on my website, I've got this thing called the section called Rejected. And it's like all the pitches that I put out there that for one reason or another, whether it's corporate politics or just some bullshit, they got rejected, right? And I was pitching a Dua Lipa project that Interscope told me was the future of music, right? And it was incorporating, her live at a stadium or at the Sphere in Vegas and having audience participation drive the digital experience. And you could log in virtually or from around the world and also take part in this thing. And
That's crazy.
if we were to do it for real with Epic, it would be 12 to 18 months to do the build. And that's after a 6-month negotiation, after all parties are already on board and the lawyers greenlight the damn thing, right? So you're talking like 2 years, right? If everything goes right to get this out the door. Okay, cool. That's one of the biggest artists in the world, Dua Lipa, right? World famous, all this shit. But what happens to smaller artists that have their moment, right? Tommy Richmond comes out with $1 Million Baby last year, right? And he has the 15 minutes of fame. Maybe it turns into 30 minutes. But on those time scales, something like Fortnite isn't available to him to capitalize on and monetize because by the time that thing gets out the door, he's not the name everyone's talking about anymore,
Yeah.
right? We're in LA and we have this whole, and I'm formerly from Toronto, and we've got this Drake versus Kendrick beef, right? With these time scales, you're not capitalizing on the beef for either artist when it takes a year plus to do the shit. And by the time you have a Fortnite thing come around, well, Not Like Us has been overplayed for 6 months already,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you create, we know that when you have ease of access and a compelling, experience like Fortnite concerts, it'll hit big. You will get millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in a goddamn weekend. We know the numbers are solid, right?
Yeah.
And Travis set the bar. But the question is, how do you make when you have the music industry, which is responsible for like $124 billion a year, right, with touring, how do you make this available to literally anyone? And, being in LA, I go to the Fonda Theater a lot for a lot of smaller R&B shows, right, for artists that are on the come up.
Yeah.
How do you make this stuff available to them when they have that moment, when they have the people that are following them and hanging off of every word and hanging off of every song? How do you make that available to them so they can spin it up in 48 hours and take advantage of that moment? That's the thing that I want to solve.
Have you ever checked out or heard La Russell? He seems like he's hip hop
No.
cat from the Bay, and
Okay.
he's doing super grassroots. I feel like he's probably one of those cats that is going to eventually do what you're
It's the
saying,
yeah.
because he's very much like when you're speaking and the first name was La Russell. I was like, wow,
Mhm.
because he literally throws concerts in the back of his house, his mom's house.
Oh, it's dope. Okay.
Like it's called
So
the pergola. It's like if you look it up, it's like the
okay.
backyard pergola, and he brings I'm talking blue chip rappers there,
Mhm.
coming up rappers, and he's like doing this thing, and he's very much in that space of how can I reach my fans that are in Tokyo? How can they see the same pergola concert that's happening now in San Jose to
Mhm.
the people out in Guam or somewhere else like that? So
Yeah,
I
yeah. That's
I
so
think once you crack that cookie, man, is you're gonna be the man to be in charge right there, because that is I honest to God, I honestly really think that, because it's like when you're saying it, I was like, I didn't know it would take just a year of paperwork before you even sit down and start
and do the work, the real
doing the
work.
work. Like I for me, I'm not in this space.
Yeah.
You're in this space. For you to sit there and say 6 to 9 months just before the lawyers say, "Hey, everybody's equal, everybody's okay with their pay, everybody's equal in understanding their position, now we can work." And that's not even before you have edits, critiques, breakdowns, artist might be sick, computer might crash. It's like, yeah, that if you find a
And
way to do that,
I'll tell you
that's
something else.
crazy.
Without naming names, but we know who the biggest player is in the virtual concert space, so I'm not gonna
Mhm,
name them. Might have
mhm.
referred to them already. I was in a meeting with them and a label, and they literally said, "We don't need you to go to the artist. We'll go if we wanna do, a skins deal or something, we're gonna go to the artist directly, and we don't need you, the label." And I'm just sitting here like, "Say what now? What did you just say to them?
How
You
you
said that with a straight face." And, and in terms of a skin deal, they're doing a deal for the likeness. But you would think that they would want participation from the label to slipstream in their roster and create that momentum to constantly do drops and like streamline the process as
Yeah.
opposed to these one-off negotiations. And so just, in my mental model of how this could all work, it could be a lot simpler, a lot quicker. And you have all these artists that, they'll go viral for a minute, and how do you sustain it? How do you reach that bigger audience? There's got to be tools, you know, and
Yeah.
the big labels will push the button. We know what the big label deals look like, and it's not always great. But how do you enable this stuff on a smaller scale so that way when they're having that moment, they can really take advantage of it and tap into that bigger audience? And that's the thing that's missing. And even, after being part of the discussions in these rooms, it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not the biggest, major label fan in the world, but how do you integrate them in a way that makes sense and everyone can come out a winner? Right? There's no reason to say to them, "Oh yeah, we have no need for you. Bye bye." Right? Like, how do you? They're a label for a reason. They have their own marketing. They have their own everything.
Yeah,
Leverage it.
because that doesn't that seems very almost ignorant of them to be like, "We don't need you." And it's like, without our okay, you can't play the music. It's just that simple. It's like, you
What's
think
the
you
skin without the music?
right, you can't do anything with it. You'll just have, I don't know, just standing up there mute. That's all you're gonna have is silence. Silent
Yeah.
disco for real. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So these are the things that, like, it's one of those things. It comes from experience, right? And you don't know what you don't know. And so having gone through some of these, exercises of trying to pitch the shit and get it sold through, you start to see how people move and what the reactions are and how different teams get involved. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, what's the solution? I love music. I love live music, and I love digital experiences. And also like if you have, all these concerts are pre-planned and pre-canned,
Right.
right? And it's the same timeline every time. How do you bring back the live element So if you can capture the stuff while people are on stage and broadcast it in a cool new way that people can participate, great. Like these are the things that I kind of want to solve for.
Yeah. What do you think? What is your take on Twitch trying to do something like that, or Twitch getting into that realm?
I'm not a Twitch guy.
Oh man,
I don't.
the only reason I say that is because I see Kai Cenat.
Yeah.
He gets on and literally listens to music, billions of views, and that
Yeah.
guy,
I mean, yeah, but the problem is, right? Because of rights management, you can't have the replays saved. Right? So you're fine in the moment for the lives,
bro.
but you can't have it be like, "Oh yeah, I did the stream yesterday. Everyone go hit the link." If you weren't, different time zone, you all were asleep, right?
Yeah,
They can't go back to it because it'll get pulled down because of rights violations.
bro.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I saw that. I have a whole DJ setup over here. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should DJ for people, but it's like, okay, cool. I don't have an audience. I have an audience for like my XR stuff. I have an audience for DJ, and I can't exactly post the mixes, and not get a copyright strike. So yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
that whole part of it's a mess. So
Damn. Okay. Well, that answered that question. Well, I was like, damn, Twitch seems like the way. You said, no, big dog, it don't work like that. It don't work like
sorry.
that at all. And I said, it's okay. Listen, I'm learning. I'm learning just like everybody listening is probably thinking the same thing. Like, oh, what about this? What about that? And you're like, not that. Can't do it. No, been there,
Yep.
done that. So, how does someone like yourself just stay motivated and inspired? Like hearing your story, there is a juggle of creativity, but also egos. Like, how do you stay in that sweet spot of, okay, now I'm free to do what I want? How do you manage that?
It's a fucking struggle.
I believe it.
Struggle. No, I mean, listen, man, it's a balance, right? I think when I was younger, I could take more risks, right? Like when I was living with my parents, and it was just
No
we
responsibility.
go make some shit and
Yeah.
see what happens, right? It's one thing, and you feel like you can explore more and not have to deal with the fallout of that, right? I'm married with like twins and shit, and I'm living in Hollywood, so my rent's 5 times higher than it was in Toronto.
Yeah.
So the risk and the willingness to kind of go crazy, naturally it goes down. But I think, I listen, I'm tapped in. I see people making the same mistakes time and time again, and I know there's a right way to approach all this. And that, up until now, man, 90% of the VR AR industry has died off, right? And by died off, I mean the people that were in it.
Yeah.
And gaming has gone to shit generally.
Mhm.
Technology, the post-COVID layoffs have come multiple times, and everyone in tech is kind of struggling to find a position, even if you were making a shit ton of money at one of the FANG companies, right? We in XR are like at the intersection of gaming and big tech. It's like the worst spot to be. And a lot of people have died off before the layoffs. And then there's another wave of people dying off now. And so, I would say 90% of the industry died off by the time COVID was done. And of what was left, that 10%, 90% of that 10% is now also gone. So I'm hoping that there's, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that we've lived through enough, we've learned enough, we've seen the mistakes being made, that maybe we're just smart enough that if the right device comes along, the right platform comes along, we can be the ones to kind of show everyone the way, and then it'll pay off, right? I think it's a game right now of how do you just survive until that great blessed day. Like really, that's what it feels
Yeah.
like. And I think we're getting there again. Apple doesn't enter, a space and fuck around. They're here for real. And so take that as a strong signal of cool. Like every other platform technology they brought to bear, it's learn as quickly as you can, figure your shit out, and be ready to hit when they're ready to hit, and you'll be good. And look at all the apps that are installed on your phone and are on that homepage.
Yeah.
They all came because of those innovations,
Mm.
and they were ready to take advantage, and they learned a lot
Yeah.
along the way. And some of my favorite designers, like app designers and developers, are all just like indies that have made like cool. I'm chronically Apple, so
Yeah.
it's the guys that made the guys from Tapbots that made like
Yeah.
Tweetbot, which is my favorite Twitter app back in the day when they allowed third party apps, and now they have Ivory, which is a Mastodon app,
Mhm.
right? The guys that make Halide, the camera app, right? They're Apple people, right? Andy Allen, who makes the Not Boring apps, he made an app called Paper, which is the best drawing app years ago, and he wanted to make software that wasn't boring and is really cool and game-like and really tactile. And now he has my favorite suite of apps ever, and I use them daily. So I feel like if you're in a position where you're able to take advantage of those technologies, you've learned enough along the way, and you're ready to hit when the platform is ready to hit, you're in a good spot. And Google's launching their stuff this year. Hopefully they hold on to it longer than 18 months, but the momentum is coming back and the interest is coming back. And I think that those of us who have been around the block more than a few times now, in almost a decade, we're ready to kind of guide people to the promised land, if you will.
Okay. That hopefully that comes back because I'm now like like, hearing you share this, I'm like excited. I know my wife is not gonna be okay with me saying, "Hey, you want to go to the Apple store in Pasadena?" Like, just might want to have to make a quick purchase.
You might want to take her to the Grove, right? Maybe some celebs will walk by and like that'll woo her.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Grove store and buy.
Yeah. That might ease the ripping off of the Band-Aid a little bit. So, oh man, this conversation has just been so fruitful. So I'm just curious, what would you now at this stage in life, being a father, having all this understanding of technology and people, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Probably nothing because he has to figure it out for himself.
Mm. So you think having hit these obstacles and hurdles allowed you to develop to who you are right now?
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know until, you figure that out. And, I think if you give someone the golden path, if you will, to not necessarily success, but like understanding,
Mhm.
it doesn't really come through because they didn't hit the roadblocks and figure out a way, right? How do you duck and dodge and weave your way to a yes? And, you can't give someone a script and be like, say these words and you'll get the contract. You have to like literally go in and just be blindsided by like some new thing that just slaps you. It's like, oh shit, I didn't account for that. Let me figure this out. Right. And now I have
Right.
to keep it in account for the next thing.
Mhm.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
when I was young and I was working at my first agency, I was like 17 or something. And my boss did all the biz dev. And, we were really steady with work for a while. And I thought, oh, wow, there's just like a lot of work for creatives. Right. And then I think that set a really horrible expectation in my head. So when I went and started working for myself, I was like, oh, it's just going to come in. I work with these guys. I want to reward with them. And like, I understand all this. No, fuck
Yeah.
no. Like, that's not how it works. You got to get out there and you got to,
Very true.
you gotta do the cold calls, the cold emails, and, like, understand that that shit doesn't work, and all you're gonna do is piss off people. So then you go, and you go talk to people at conferences, right? And so, like, I was going in debt to my parents to, like, send me to conferences like SIGGRAPH when it was in Vancouver, and it was still in Canada.
Yeah.
And, like, I went to Oculus Connect, I think, a couple times and, like, all these random things just to meet people.
Yeah.
And I was making shit all the time. It wasn't necessarily good, but I was part of the conversation, and that's kinda what built up my Twitter and got me to meet people. Like my first trip to LA was on the back of I met people on Twitter that, we got along with.
Mhm.
We saw things the same way. Maybe there was a chance to work together down the road. Let me just go see them for real and not be like that little, stupid picture on Twitter. Let them like actually know me,
Yeah.
other than my snarky tweets. And I came down here and met up with a bunch of people, and then that led into during the pandemic, I was fully booked because of people that I met on the trip that interacted with on Twitter. I was like one of the only people I knew that was still making my rent payment every month because I wasn't totally feeling it because I had done the work,
Right.
right? And people knew who I was.
Mm.
Um, and you couldn't have told me. So there was a thread I did on Twitter years ago. I still say Twitter, not X, but it was me kind of dismantling every XR platform and like calling them out for the shit that they had done and why they weren't hitting.
Yeah.
And, at the time, Quest was doing really well and that was kind of the chosen one. And all the other platforms were kind of falling apart.
Mhm.
And I got a DM. I had done this thing, I think it was on a Saturday. Everyone paid attention to it. It was wild. I just didn't know it would do that. And I had an executive from HP DM me, and she was complaining that I never mentioned HP in the thread. Keep in mind,
You're shitting.
at a yeah. And so, like, it was like Facebook and Oculus was the only platform worth a damn. All of you people suck because of these reasons. And she was like, "You left us out." I'm like, "You realize I would have shit on you."
Yes.
Like, you guys are a subset of Microsoft's platform, which is horrible, and you guys aren't even a platform. You just have hardware for their you're not a platform. Why are you even part of the conversation? And she was like, "This thing is taking off so much. I wanted us to be mentioned." And I'm like, "Is this like any press is good press?
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
is this right?" So when you're saying, what advice can you give yourself when you're 18? You only learn shit like that by doing it and living it.
Right.
Right? And this stuff moves so fast and sentiments, change so quickly, especially in social media age where like, everything is shifting with the wind these days.
Yeah.
You can't predict this shit to tell someone younger what to do. And like, my kids are 3. I don't know what the fuck to tell them for when,
Right.
they're approaching college age. Is college even going to be a thing in 15 years?
Right.
Right? I learned all this stuff on YouTube,
Same. I've done that.
right? And, I was like weird child project. I started university when I was 16, dude. And like I don't use anything that I learned in school. I don't even know what school is. I had one prof that we got kicked out because he was ripping off Wikipedia for his lectures.
Oh, wow.
What does it even mean to go, right? So like I don't even know what it means to go to school. I don't know. This stuff moves so fast.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
there were, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was a lot of training you could buy, or if you were broke, you would, go on the wild seas and, pirate this stuff, and you would get all your tutorials and learn this stuff. And now the same materials or better materials are freely available on YouTube.
Yep. In 6 different ways and 10 different time stamps, you can do it. You can learn it in 5
Dude.
minutes, learn it in 10 minutes, learn it in 20, learn it in 3.
And then now ChatGPT is coming for,
Mm.
developer jobs to a degree. Well, yeah, everything really, advertising as well. Um, morality aside, that's a whole Pandora's box. But it's like the stuff you're Googling or searching on YouTube 3 years ago, you can just get out of a prompt now. Or,
Right.
if it's a little bit more complex, you certainly will be in a year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you tell the younger version the path to take and advice? Like, we wake
Wait.
up and see a new press release from OpenAI, and it's like, oh shit, that whole thing, that whole industry just got upended overnight,
Right.
right? And it's funny, the same day that the Studio Ghibli feature was added to ChatGPT, I had a ticket to go see Princess Mononoke in IMAX, the
Mhm.
re-release. And I was like, like Studio Ghibli, amazing artists. They hand drew everything. This is like one of their seminal works that like changed everything. It changed culture, right? And like suddenly anyone can crank this shit out
Yeah.
with a prompt the same day. Like
Yeah. What took them years to perfect, they can do it in 15 seconds.
there was one tweet I saw. I can't remember which one of the Ghibli films, but there was like one sequence where everyone was walking past each other in an
Oh,
intersection. It was really complex. It took them a year to animate it. A year to
that's
animate.
crazy.
And now that shit, one or two prompts across two of these things, or you just get your video footage and say Ghiblify it, and it's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I see why you said
this is unprecedented, right? Like
yeah.
we've never in human history, things have never moved this fast,
No.
right? Ever. And the access to information, access to new capabilities is never, these things have never come online so fast. You never had access to it from like this little fucking screen in your pocket,
Yeah.
right? This is
Right.
insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, whiplash.
Yeah. I could I That makes sense because it's like you tell them, "Hey, do this, this, and this," and then you're still learning the process even if you're trying to tell them what's coming.
And half the stuff we tell them though probably won't exist,
No, it wouldn't.
right?
It wouldn't.
And like, if you had asked our parents when they were younger, it probably would have referred to maybe a computer that's plugged into a wall at home, and their reference point is like dial-up internet when they're our age or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And now we've got this 5G thing in our goddamn pockets
Yep.
and these cute, huge screens and what?
Right.
What?
Yeah. It would have flabbergasted them. They would have been like, "Ugh, impossible." Man, that's crazy. Well, Andre, man, you are just blessing us with so much knowledge right now. It really is.
Life experience. I feel like an old man sometimes, but
Listen, it's okay. My students call me Unc, and I'm like, "How am I Unc? Like, get out of my classroom." So it's
that's what
okay.
I'm saying.
We've reached Unc status, and I consider that a rites of
I
passage.
prefer OG, but yeah, I'll take Unc. It's fine.
They don't give us OG, dude.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Younger people than us are getting OG. We get Unc now.
Okay, fair, fair.
All right. Well, oh man, just want to kind of bring this to a sweet point. So, where do you see you, Andre, in 5 years? Do you still see you going down this deep adventure in XR and AR, or do you see yourself pivoting in another direction, more or less?
I think I want to see this through. I
Mm,
want to see this through to more people are aware of it and open to it and have a better understanding of it. I think right now, it's like people go into a Best Buy and they'll see a Quest on the shelf. And it's like, oh, that's cool. I guess that's the thing that sits in my face, and like that's where it stops. Or they see the conversation around Vision Pro. And it's like, oh, it's the price of a MacBook, but on my
yeah.
head, right? I want to get to a point where it's better understood, the use cases are more defined and like there's more openness to it, and maybe you're willing to pick up a device and it'll replace 2 or 3 other devices that you would otherwise have, right? I want to see it through to that point and we'll go from there. I'm an elder statesman at this point in this
See?
space, so
Well, welcome to Unc status. So, is there any final advice for creators, developers, or even entrepreneurs who are looking to push these boundaries of XR?
if you want to see it exist, just make it, because there's a chance that someone else will want that too. um and I'll say, if you can't, this stuff was so early
Yeah.
that you can't look for validation from someone else, and certainly not the platforms. And, they're collecting data just as much as you are. They don't know what works. The use cases are still to be defined. And like I said before, at the advent of the iPhone, no one knew that Uber was coming, right? No one knew that this app called Airbnb would upend hotels,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Even that, no one,
No one
no
saw
one saw
Netflix
that.
coming,
Yeah.
right? And we didn't think that we'd go from cable to Netflix to basically cable by way of all the different streamers, right?
Yeah.
So we can't predict it, and the platforms don't know. I'll tell you, man, like years ago, if you look at the guidance from, Oculus or whoever else, I think they're saying, single player narrative games were the thing that would drive adoption and revenue. And so suddenly you had a bunch of studios making single player narrative games for VR. And, these games were 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever. They're like
Mm,
proper single player games.
yeah.
And people thought this was the way forward and this is going to make me rich. And they didn't, because nobody wants to wear a goddamn headset for 8 hours to finish a campaign, right?
Yeah.
Doing that with a controller and a PlayStation or an Xbox on TV,
Yeah.
easier, right? People are lazy, which is fine. It was Gorilla Tag, this like shitty meme of a game where people were walking around on their knuckles pretending to be gorillas, that made like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it was a meme, it was a joke, but that was the one that broke through.
Yeah.
And completely contrary to what the platform would have told you or what their understanding was.
Yeah.
So if you want to see something exist, just go do it, make it, don't ask for permission,
Right.
And also keep in mind, so the thing that everyone talks about now is, Meta's burned $10 billion making this whole headset thing happen, right? And it's not just the hardware, it's the software and it's the infrastructure that goes along with it. And it's all the, PhDs and researchers figuring out what the future of this looks like. Right. So I don't think that headline ever really gives it a fair shake. But knowing the expense that it's cost to get to this point, understanding how much Apple has spent in years in secret, the Vision Pro I think has 2,000 brand new patents that were created just for it, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of investment, and I think
Mhm.
everything now that comes out really has the potential to have all eyes on it,
Mhm.
and it's kind of important for everyone to know that they can't poison the well.
Got it.
When this shit was a dev kit a million years ago that you needed like a really expensive computer to plug into and it was all hacky,
Yeah.
experiments were totally cool and experimenting should always be a thing. But the potential now between, viral moments and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Reddit, don't poison the well.
Hey, that's
And know
huge.
and know that, that one bad headline will probably fuck up someone else's pitch when they're going to a stakeholder and being like, "Hey, we want to do this thing." If that headline goes the wrong way, because there was an app that came out. I think it was on the Quest. So when Quest opened up uh, App Lab, which was like
Mm.
you had two tracks, right? You had the official store. We had to go through like QA and like certification to make sure that
Yeah.
your game didn't crash everyone's devices and shit like that. Then there was the other one, which is App Lab, where
Yeah.
anyone could just throw a thing up, right?
Yeah.
There was a guy who ran a blog and he did an app called like Cube or Gray Cube or something like that. And it was literally just a Unity engine template project with a cube as an app. There was nothing else. And he got it onto the store.
Mhm.
And suddenly there's headlines about like, wait, is nobody manning the store? And like you can get anything you want in there. And it's like, fuck. Like, I don't want to deal with these questions. That was just dumb, right?
Right.
So stuff like that poisons the well. And I think, as long as everyone's aiming to, we have a shared goal of creating really dope work that connects with regular people so we can move this further, we're all good, right? And anyone who's left still in the space, you have some level of understanding of what it takes to survive in it and, what works and what doesn't work. And for new people, yeah, try this stuff out, but understand that, we're about to have that breakthrough moment and
Just
some
be
dumb
ready.
shit will backfire. But if you're ready and you have something great,
Yep.
be ready for like the hockey stick moment, right? That hockey
Right.
stick curve. So
Yeah. All right. Andre, how can people find you and follow your work and keep up with you?
Twitter.com or x.com/Andre Elijah. Andre Elijah Rejected on Instagram. I think I'm on Blue Sky and Mastodon is just Andre Elijah. And then AndreElijah.com. So you can see random portfolio projects and shit that's been rejected by the powers that be.
Yes. All right, you guys. My name is Justin Robinson. I have the pleasure of the great, creative, gives it to you straight, Andre Elijah. And this is the Art School Graduate Podcast. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.